Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. One of the strangest platitudes bandied about in creative circles is the notion that art exists to push boundaries. I've been thinking a lot about this since the video I did a couple of weeks ago about Jerry Seinfeld. While I have heard this particular nostrum in conjunction with basically every creative field at least once or twice, I seem to hear it the most in regards to comedy. And I don't think the people who have said it have ever stopped to think critically about it, because I think it actually falls apart under the slightest bit of scrutiny. I wanted to talk about it primarily in the vein of comedy because I think there's actually the biggest case to make for it in the medium of comedy. But what I'm going to say here largely applies to pretty much any creative art form, be it textual, audio, visual or sculptural, however you want to put architecture, sculpture, things like that. So the betrayal of expectations is, in fact, something that makes things funny. And the comic is forced to constantly dabble in subjects considered taboo or morally repugnant in order to betray expectations. That's the theory, at least. After all, how can we laugh if we already know the punchline of the joke? My response to that is to ask a very simple question. Is it really necessary to subvert expectations in order to tell a joke? And in general, I believe the answer is no. There are plenty of very funny jokes, stories, and pratfalls that have gotten me to laugh more than once. If some kind of manipulation of expectations is inherent to comedy, then it should not be the case, as knowing the punchline to a joke makes it impossible for said punchline to take me by surprise. My expectations cannot be subverted. And yet, I still laugh watching Duck Soup. There are many reasons we laugh at a joke. We can find the skill it is delivered with delightful, as we do when watching the physical comedy of Buster Keaton or Red Skelton. We can laugh at the absurdity of a situation, as we might when watching the pratfalls in Home Alone. There is an entire genre of comedy that finds humor in the awkwardness of life, embodied in shows like The Office. We can indeed laugh because a joke surprises us. However, none of these things are funny because they push boundaries in and of themselves. As we would say in college, they are funny because they are true. When we laugh at skillful physical comedy, we laugh because we see something that we would have thought impossible carried out in reality. Yet, when props, special effects, or even animation, as in Looney Tunes, push things beyond what is real, we still laugh because they are absurd. The contrast with reality becomes the joke. You can string together a series of non sequiturs and no one will laugh. Surprise is only funny if the twist has some kind of truth beneath it, some kind of through line that connects it to reality or the experience of the audience. The way the twist comes together is important, of course, and it is the skill with which the twist is created and delivered that is the difficult part of comedy. So it's not surprising that this skill aspect of comedy is what gets so much emphasis. Now, we could say that a comedian pushes boundaries by pushing their skills. I don't disagree with that idea. However, I don't honestly believe that anyone who says comedy is about pushing boundaries means that. They are referring to some nebulous idea about bringing new concepts into the cultural discussion. It's a very psychological, Jordan Peterson-esque idea. It's not surprising, given the laugh-a-minute natures of psychology and Jordan Peterson. Now that, my friends, could be construed as a joke. Since it's not a great one, I will take a moment and do that thing comics are not supposed to do. I will explain the joke. It functions by contrasting the very serious, deliberately unemotional affect of psychologists in general, and Jordan Peterson in particular, with the idea of laugh-a-minute comedy. The contrast is stark and surprising, and thus funny, if not particularly so. The joke is more than just a piece of humor. It also says something about our culture and how we look at the field of psychology, both in general and one psychologist in particular. It is this power, the ability to entertain, while also commenting on and, via the observer effect, shaping the way our culture functions, that makes comedy so powerful. All art forms have this power to some extent. This function is what pushes boundaries on those occasions where art comes up against some kind of social boundary. It's not surprising that this is what grabs people's attention when talking about the power of art. However, to confuse it with the purpose of art is to make a dangerous mistake. It is to make the assumption that the purpose of all things is power. The purpose of art is to immortalize what is true and lasting, to put the audience in touch with an experience beyond the confines of their normal life in one way or another. That is why a story like A Christmas Carol remains almost universally beloved, even though it permeates our culture to an equally universal extent. It doesn't have to seek out a boundary to push. In many ways, it is a boundary in and of itself, a standard for stories about how those set in their ways can change for the better. It can do this because showing that is the purpose. And when it fulfills that purpose, it doesn't have to take up a new one. It doesn't have to seek to push boundaries. It just has to do what it set out to do. And if that's outside the boundaries, the people moved by the story will change the boundaries to match it. The same is true in comedy or any other art form. That is an idea worth keeping in mind. Or at least that's what I think. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. There's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use those as you see fit. And I'll talk to you later.